Your story is one that should resonate with a lot of folks on here because you came to this industry from outside of it. You figured out a path to success and you went for it.
So I'm like, okay, I know what equipment, where to buy it, and where I can monitor it. I just got to figure out how I'm going to get a customer.
Because nothing empowers you. In my perspective, nothing will charge you up more than definitively deciding, no, we're growing from here.
This business, I go by and make sure they haven't scraped my name off the door, but this business is a whole lot bigger than just me.
It could be a very big gamble. I mean, I can't tell you how many folks went out of business in that time.
And it wasn't until a few years later when people started to say, wow, you're an entrepreneur. I'm like, okay. And I later defined what that is.
Well, good morning and welcome to Coffee Break with Jake. I'm Jake, and I'm excited to be joined today by John Loud with Loud Security Systems. Guys, if you're new to this call, we have this call every Friday at 11 a.m. And the purpose of the call is to bring together folks much smarter than me because selfishly, I want to learn from them. I've learned that the most important things I know, I've learned from other people. And so we host this call every week to talk about issues, challenges, opportunities, best practices, and to share the stories of some of the most successful folks in this industry. And so again, I'm very excited to be joined today by John Loud. John, I think of you sometimes as like the mayor of the security industry. Everybody knows John Loud, but John, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get into your origin story in just a bit, but tell us a little bit about Loud Security and where you're calling in from.
So I'm based in the Atlanta, Georgia marketplace. And good morning, everybody. And Jake, huge congratulations to you, your business, the podcast. You are providing such a valuable resource. Sometimes as many of us integrators, we can monitor wherever or purchase product wherever, but when you got a value add to actually help us grow our business in ways. So huge accolades to you and your entire team and what you guys have been building on and the partnership within the industry for all of us on this call. And I've joined the call just as a listener many times through the years. And I also pick up many different nuggets along the way. But for me personally, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts area, was up there for a better part of my life. And then got a crazy hair, decided to want to be a pilot, got hired by Delta Airlines and American Airlines as a flight attendant, chose Delta, went and built all my single, multi, commercial, twin engine pilot licenses, and realized how boring that is to sit in a cockpit talking to some guy beside me for 3 days at a time, typically, and being a computer programmer. And I really enjoyed and loved people from even the back of the plane to help and interact with different folks, to just different aspects. I certainly wired that way. And just as you're doing in this type of thing, I love to connect and help people. For me, I talk a lot about R&D, which is what we're doing here. And it's not research and development. It's a lot of rip off and duplicate. And when I get to listen and learn from others on this call and have through the decades, we get to then try things at Loud to see if they could work. But I'm not in my office. I told Jake we're doing some stuff with WSB Radios, hosting Yacht Rock for a concert coming up. And they asked me to come in for their live studio session from 12 to 1. So I said, all right, I'll figure this out from the radio station and get to still keep the time slot and get to interact with you and many of the others on the call today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John, and thank you for the kind words, and thank you for being here to share your story and your expertise with us. So, you talk about your background as a pilot, and so many of the folks that I talk to, they kind of just they've always been in the security industry, right? Like for myself, I grew up in an alarm company, family business. So many of the other folks, just the security industry is just a part of their background. Tell me a little bit more about your background with Delta, and then what brought you to this? How did you end up in the security industry, John?
Yeah. It is so far out of left field, and I do have to reiterate at this point, my name is John Loud. I was born with the last name Loud. I did not change my last name to make this convenient for a business name. So while I was a flight attendant, a passenger, and I was trying to realize I didn't want to be a pilot forever and how boring that was. And I was sitting there as the most unemployed but yet employed person for about a 2-year journey, going, all right, God, what's the answer? What's the plan? What's the direction? Already had my college degree as political science major. And many of you realize that when you graduate college with a political science major, there's not many companies out there hiring political scientists. Like, what's that? Right. Anyway, so it's like, to me, we do a lot with workforce development and training focus just because I'm an example of I got my college degree, I get my pilot training, I got my flight. What is that going to be? And a passenger taught me about recurring monthly revenue. And I'm like, what in the world is recurring monthly revenue? Because nobody in my family had ever had an alarm system. I had never worked for an alarm company. I never had an alarm system. But I started doing the research and I started to learn about money management, insurance agent. And I actually went to a Georgia Burglar Fire Alarm Association show. And when I was there was a woman that was the manufacturer rep, Jeannie Hammerberg with DSC, and she goes, "Oh, you really ought to buy DSC equipment." And then she introduced me to a distributor that said, "Hey, if you buy from this distributor, they give you a certificate to monitor at this particular monitoring center for 1 year for free." So I'm like, okay, I know what equipment, where to buy it, and where I can monitor it. I just got to figure out how I'm going to get a customer. So to my comment earlier about R&D, rip off and duplicate, I then had 8 alarm companies come to my house to sell me an alarm system. So six of the 8 used DSC. So by the time that was done, I figured out a bunch of pricing. I got a lot of contract and paperwork, and I learned a little bit more about placement and so forth. And then I actually said, you know what, I'm going to go get hired. I got hired by Ackerman, went to training for almost a week. And I kind of felt like for my personality, more of an education sale, their sales was just way too pushy. So I never went on a sales call, nothing, and said, you know what, I think I'm going to start this on my own. And so my marketing piece at the beginning is I had to make that choice. Am I going to focus commercial or residential? And this was a tough dilemma, right? As we all know. And I did get a loan for about $20,000 from a bank, personal line. About 6 months later, I paid that back and we were fully debt free all the way till the year 2010. And we can talk about that later. And my marketing choice was residential. And I chose to sell a package to real estate agents for them to give it as a closing gift at closing. So now whether you're buying a resale home or a new construction home, you don't know your neighbors, you don't know the contractors, you don't know who's around. And at that point in 1995, this is what I would call a value gift. Even though they can only legally pay me $25, and it was a base 3 doors and a motion type package. Bruce Scott Free was around at the time. There were many other, that was kind of the marketplace. We were charging $24.95 for monitoring, which is kind of more the ADT and Brinks at that point in time. But I would sell that package to the agent. They would give it as a gift. And a tagline I created really early on was take action 30 days too soon instead of 1 day too late.
Mm.
So for them, say, okay, I'm going to get moved in, but get this system activated and going. And what ultimately led from the real estate agents ultimately led to kind of their sphere of influence or their sphere of trust. So when you buy a home, you trust in 5 people: a real estate agent you select, a mortgage lender that you're going to show your full financial everything to get the loan, a home inspector to be able to say, yep, everything's good. And then mortgage lender, home inspector, real estate agent. And then obviously it led on to builders. So we were not involved with builders for quite some time. But at that point, we were 100% residential. And then as we focused on the builders, we got heavily involved in builders, but we focused on the high-end custom builder. So in that case, we were doing theater rooms and vacuum and intercom and automation and lighting control and obviously hanging lots of TVs and things of that sort. But if you go all the way to the years 2007, 8, 9, if you will, we had about 40 to 50 high-end custom builders, and we had several other builders that were not really custom, a total of 63 builders at that time. And if many of you on this call remember that economy, only one builder survived.
Wow.
One
Yep.
builder. And Diane, my controller, she's been with me for 20 plus years. And Diane was like, say, Jake, if you're my builder, you know what? Guess what? You and I probably become friends and buds and all that. And Diane would be like, you and Jake can be all the friends you want. But if they are 1 day past 60 days paying that bill, I'm putting a lien on that property.
Yep.
And as the only shareholder and owner of Loud Security, to have the team you build, you trust and believe. And I'm like, all right, Diane, I totally get it. So at the end of the day, when those builders collapsed, we literally lost about a total of $77,000 through that entire process. So it was very fortunate to have somebody like her and for us to survive and obviously transition from the builder world into something else.
I want to
But
unpack a couple of things here. First of all, you make starting a security company sound so easy. I love how easy well, I found out what equipment I needed. I found out where I was going to monitor it at. And then all I needed to figure out was how to get a customer, right? Like, oh, little things, right? But I love that you talk about you figured out all that you could figure out, and then you have this small problem of like, hey, how am I going to find a customer? And then I love how you just mapped out for everybody on the call, hey, here's how I did it. Number one, I started with these realtors, right? I looked for that circle of trust and these folks that could refer us in. And that helped us to start building, and finding new customers, and then partnering with home builders. And then, I'm so appreciative of the cautionary tale that you include within that, because so many of the folks that, quite frankly, so many of the folks that we do business with, they saw, and in some cases, some of them still see home builders as the best path to new systems, to new subscribers. And like you found with the housing crisis and the 2008 2009, it could be a very big gamble. I mean, I can't tell you how many folks went out of business in that time. I remember my dad actually did a lot of work with home builders, and I still remember as a kid, a teenager, looking out the window and seeing his technicians doing work around the house, like trimming the hedges and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't know at the time what had happened, but I realized what it was is he had all these guys and the work slowed down, and now he wanted to keep them working while they kind of navigated through that downturn, and thank God they did. But I just think it's such a important nugget in there, John, that you talk about, that even though you face that hardship, because you had the right team of folks around you and you had the right, kind of checks and balances in place, it only ended up being, and for a lot of folks, $70,000, it's still a big hit. Now, we recognize that, but it's not, chapter 11 kind of hit, right? I mean, I think that's
right.
the difference here. And so, John, before we get into the rest of this, and we hadn't planned for this, but because you kind of talked about that, tell me about who were those first hires that you made, right? Like you figured out the equipment, the central station, how to get customers. Tell me about how you built your core team right out the gate, and who some of those first hires were.
Great question. So for me, at first, I'm not a technical person as much, even though later on, two
Me
years into
neither.
it,
Don't tell anybody,
yeah.
John. I've installed one alarm system and I did it poorly.
Jake, you'll love this. I would literally, and think about those that use subcontractors or are subcontractors. So it was all about, after I found a customer, I had to figure out how I'm going to get it installed. And that became the toughest piece. But by working with local distributors, would they share with me other subcontractors that are, doing that, like your dad may needed some other folks to help fill in their technician work. So I ended up getting one subcontractor from a company, then he led me to others, and then it led on to firefighters. So firefighters became a niche that wanted to have a part-time. But I also have to embarrassingly share, I was 2 years in business. So in 1997, I realized I was supposed to have a low voltage license.
I won't tell anybody. The statute of limitations, I think, has since passed. Yeah.
Well, sadly, well, I guess so. Two of my subcontractors were not licensed either, and they wanted to get licensed. So I went and spent $800+ on the books for myself and for them. And we went through the licensing process. I passed because I knew nothing, but I knew what resource to go to get the answers. They did not pass because they knew everything and they didn't know the books. And obviously, I only went through a training to learn in the books where what is. And
Sure.
after I did get licensed, I actually then installed for almost 10 years. And my team, if some are on the call, you'll meet some, they'll explain that they stopped me from installing because they got sick of fixing everything I installed. But that's not true. And I still let them work here. But it was so those two subs were with me for quite some time. And I was also one as a as an employer in this case, even with subs, if they did the job that day, you know when they got paid? Usually that day or the next day. My feeling was you did the job, I'm paying you. So for a company that paid quickly, as many of you know, don't mess with a person's money and get them compensated. They're going to continue to come back for more and more. So that I created a great relationship from that standpoint. It was in 1998, to give you a surprise. I did find a greener pasture I was moving on to, and I was monitored at CMS Monitoring at the time, and I decided I'm going to go sell. So I went and sold a block of my accounts, and then the tax bill came, and I had to sell more, and then the quarterly tax bill came, and I had to sell more, and then my greener pasture wasn't as green as it is. So here we are 30 years later with 14,000 plus customers and still plugging away and growing along the way. The big important thing that happened to me then, and this I think is important for a lot of listeners today at whatever level we all are. I'll always say that, look, Loud Security Systems today, we are as small as a company as we're ever going to be right now. So sometimes what am I going to listen, learn, try, fail at, or change to, whether it's software or processes of pay or how I'm going to hire, retain, workforce development, or the workplace environment. But my choice back in the late 90s, where I think is a big transformational change for us, is I said, I don't want to be the sole owner of a small pie. I'd rather be an owner. I'd rather have some pieces of the bigger pie. As I said earlier, even though I'm the only shareholder, I now have 70 employees that I'm paying and taking care of our team in many ways. This business, I go by and make sure they haven't scraped my name off the door, but this business is a whole lot bigger than just me. And you've kind of touched on this on some calls not too long back. And I'll never forget the day looking outside one day, seeing 14 vehicles in the parking lot, realizing probably most of those have car payments. They have anniversaries and Christmas and birthdays. And I was still the only salesperson at that point. So part of where your question goes, how do you transition from being you to you plus some subs to then actually hiring some employees? And to me, of course, a lot of times it was always, oh dear God, what have you done here? Because I looked out the window and said, I'm like, this all relies on me. And probably the toughest transition of all transitions was really letting another salesperson come in and take the leads. And out of 20, they may only close 8 of them. And Jake, you and I both know if we had 20 leads, we're going to close 22 of the 20 leads. So it was a tough process to watch them mangle 12 and then only mangle 10 or 8 or 5. But I just had to allow myself, as many technicians are on the call, if I'm going to put a motion over in that corner and the control room's back there, should I put my box of wire where the motion is? Or do I pull the wire from the control room? There's no right way, there's no wrong way, but there's the way you prefer. And I just had to learn to sometimes get out of the way and know that, look, we're all human beings. We deal with technology. We're not perfect, but it's not that my way has got to be that way. But I think for me to make that decision to want to grow the business and only have certain roles and areas of responsibility, so it doesn't all sit on my shoulders. I'm not the only on-call technician for the rest of my life. But it's a process to be willing to let go and know that some mistakes will occur.
I think that's such an important piece of scale, right? Like at some point, you have to bring folks on that, in some respects, they may be better than us at certain things. But then we're also going to have folks in the team that, if we did that thing, we might be better than they would be at that thing. We can coach them and help them to be the best that they can be. But you have to recognize that you need more people to get where we're going, right? And you realize that. And I love the example of talking about, hey, should the box of wire be where we're running the sensor from, or should the box of wire be from where the control panel is? Because that's something that, maybe that's a personal preference. And I'm sure there's folks in the call that have a very strong opinion on that one way or the other. We'll set that
Yes.
aside for now. But I think that there are some things that as a leader, you decide are non-negotiable, right? You could put that box there, you could put it there. But then there's some things like customer service, as an example, which I think is something that, you've really done an incredible job building a business that's still founder led and still has this perception of personal service, whether it's from you, John, or it's from your team, but still kind of operating with the same expectations for customer service. We're gonna move on from the Delta piece, but I'm curious. Did some of your experience at Delta impact how you see customer service, how you saw it early on, and how you set standards for customer service for your team as you grew as a company?
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's, what your summation is, it's all about culture, right? And as the leader, you're going to develop the culture because either you're going to lead the culture and develop it, or a culture is going to develop in your firm. And whether it's the installation team, sales, or admin, whether you like it or not, now you're going to choose how and what that philosophy is going to be like and what's the direction of customer care, as well as working amongst a team to help each other out in so many factors. Another thing for me, like I never knew I was an entrepreneur. I barely could say it, never mind spell it. Look, I'm a flight attendant, right? What do I know? And it wasn't until a few years later when people started to say, wow, you're an entrepreneur. I'm like, okay. What? And I later defined what that is. And that to me is when determination outpaces fear. So think
Mhm.
about that. Determination outpaces fear. And another line years later I learned was, what is it that's distracting you, that's keeping you from achieving your goals and your focus?
Mm.
So what is it that you're allowing for distractions in your life that's keeping you from your goals and your achievements and your focus? And just as, the business is bigger than just one person and my name may be on the door type thing, it's building and instilling and supporting in many of them. But I'll tell you, even for our marketing, whether it's radio or print or other aspects, my cell phone number, ever since we've had a website, has always been on that website. Eric Widner, who's been with me 23 of my 30 years, Eric's our COO. Eric's cell number is on the website. So 24 hours a day, if somebody has a question or problem, because I challenge all of us on this call. None of us want to lose a customer, but we all know that we have technology that's perfect. And sometimes some of our coworkers have family issues, health issues, monetary issues. Who knows what the issues, right? They're dealing with, sometimes you may know or not. But I would rather get a feeling or an insight or call before somebody wants to cancel. Because even if they go to cancel, I'm not necessarily in all our cancellation meetings anymore to have discussions because you have normal attrition. But if somebody wants to call or talk or text or whatever, there's no call I'm not comfortable to take because I get to listen and learn about what it's like to be a customer today than maybe when I've done every role. I've done installs, I've done the billing, the collections, the ordering, the payments. I remember years ago, and some of you guys won't understand this, but years ago, people used to write out paper checks and they would mail a paper check to my home because it was in the basement of the house. And I'll never forget the day when I got 25 checks all in one time. So I'm like, that's like
Mailbox money.
to think though that these people chose to sit down, write a check, fill out the envelope, put a stamp on there and send it, and then to have a full checkbook of checks. I mean, it just meant a lot because it was another piece of confidence to say, we're choosing you. And we all know here's a scary number for y'all. In Cobb County, Georgia, 700 plus thousand citizens, the two alarm ordinances we have here, we have over 100,000 registered subscribers in Cobb County. There's 6 cities plus the county. So a little over, not 100, a little over 100,000 registered subscribers. Guess, Jake, I want you to guess how many, as an alarm company, I have to register to dispatch in those jurisdictions. If I register your home, there's no cost. For me as an alarm company, there's no cost. And if I register your business, there's no cost to register. Guess how many alarm companies are registered to monitor those 100,000 customers?
How many?
724.
Wow.
So obviously they're from all over the nation, that different
Sure.
companies that own an account that happens to be in Cobb. But my point of that is, how can we build a culture and a team to deliver the exceptional customer service when people are going to go pick a hotel tonight? Some are going to choose Ritz-Carlton, some are going to choose Motel 6. If you look at Bonvoy or Hilton, they've got 10 brands with all different price points. And what's that right investment value level that you feel like is the right answer? We develop things internally early on in my company, and it's a program called 222 Loud. And I do know that my team has cut it down to only be 22. But my initial part was 2 days, 2 weeks, and 2 months after every install and every service call, let us proactively just call the customer. Do you have any questions? How are things going? Obviously, we can look at our monitoring center data to see whether they've had anything. We also, so now our team does 2 days and 2 weeks only. They don't do the 2 month because obviously you're leaving lots of voicemails and messages and nobody's but it's still just another touch, care, follow up. We do on a daily basis, the next business day after any alarm dispatch. So we actually dispatched enrolled equipment, police, fire, medical. We are calling that premise to check in to see, is it equipment? Is it education? Is everybody okay? What can we do to help? And then we also are calling on, everything from low batteries or any other potential service related, because we know that beeping that happens at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we have a lot of internal, just proactive things, as well as my cell number and others. Like I said, we're as small as we're ever going to be. How do we retain? But then how do we show our team that we care about each and every customer too?
What I'm hearing from you is just a commitment to being very, very connected to your customer. And, in a way that I always say that the worst problem as a business owner, the worst problem is the problem that we don't know about, right?
Exactly.
Some negative experience, some issue that we're unaware of. And to put your own phone number out there, number one, I'm amazed. I'd love to unpack that with you on a whole other conversation, because I have given my cell phone number out to a lot of folks that I'm drowning in some of that sometimes. But I'm very impressed with the message that that sends. And I think that what you talk about, not just putting your phone number out there like, hey, call me if there's a problem. You also talk about this 2-2 methodology of making sure that you're touching the customer after the install proactively. That's not waiting for a call like, hey, I've got a issue here. That's trying to get that feedback early on. And I think that's another piece of it, because so many times I think that there may be some issues, some concerns, some opportunity to be better, right? That we're not aware of because it wasn't enough of a thing for that person to pick up the phone and call. It maybe not have been enough of a thing for somebody to leave a review on Google, but by reaching out and making sure everything worked out, met their expectations, it gives you that opportunity to collect feedback. And I think and I want to segue here into what I think that means for your brand, right? I mean, this is you're a company of 70, plus employees, but it may not be John Loud doing everything, but it sure as heck is John Loud's name on the building and on the sign and at the ballpark. All of these brand messages that are more than a brand. I kind of see it as like John Loud's signature of like a commitment to, hey, this is who we are, this is how we do things, and I'm John Loud, right? Like, and I stand behind it. Talk to me about, I mean, number one, if my last name was as cool as that, I would figure out some way to brand a company over it, right? Loud in of itself is a memorable brand name, but what made you lean into that? Like, people decide I can't tell you how many advanced securities and absolute securities and so many, you know, honestly, it's a
Mhm.
problem when people call in, we have to ask them which one it is because we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why did you lean into Loud? What was the reason? What was the reason behind that, and why have you stayed so committed to that Loud brand?
Great question, because it's also obviously one part, it's easy and it's obvious, right? People want a loud security system. Nobody wants it quiet. Just like our April Fools, we've changed our name to Silent Security System. Okay, just kidding. But I admire many other company owners out there that, it's Smith Alarms or it's whatever because it's like the Purdue chicken, right? My name's on it. You're going to stand behind it in such a different way to be able to say, just like every single customer we bring on new every month, I hand sign a thank you letter and welcoming them into Loud Charity. I make sure I sign that. Even if we've done an acquisition with a book of business, I make sure I hand sign. It doesn't matter if it's 200 or 800. I'm going to hand sign it because I know that's possibly my only interaction to be able to say, hey, thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity that, you get to make a choice every day, whether that one of the 700 and some odd companies that are out there are going to be the right answer. And I think back to, the cell number or the customer interaction, it does become one of those that, with your name there, you are going to find out if you have an employee that's grumpy all the time and you don't know, right? You're not listening to the audio recordings. It's going to shine that if all of a sudden I keep getting calls about this guy Jake, and we're like, you know what, he needs coffee for coffee break. He shouldn't have water. You know, you're going to identify if there's something going on, and it's a way that I may not be entrenched in every piece, but I'm involved or engaged in every aspect on a daily basis. Doesn't matter where in the world I'm traveling to. My cell phone works, my email works, my texting works. So I'm never having an out of office, but I enjoy that. I'm fine. I've got tremendous JOY within my JOB, and that's
Love it.
something that's important.
You guys have won awards, not just, for operations and all that, but from a marketing perspective, like you've won awards for your marketing. Could you talk to us about some of the ways, and you don't have to get into all of it, but if you could talk to us maybe about some of the cool marketing things that you guys have done that you've been most proud of that have helped promote your brand within the local market.
You know what? I'll tell you what, I'm going to lead into that and mention a guy named John Bennett. John Bennett, I hired years ago to be my director of sales. And like most of us on this call, we can be quick to hire and slow to fire, right? 2 years into John's 5 years with me, I knew 2 years in, I really should let him go. But such a great guy, had a great relationship. But it's like, what's the production? What's really going on? And it just wasn't there. So guess what? It took me 5 years to finally sit down and say, it's time to move on. When John Bennett loved the company, the culture, each piece, and it's like, I want to stay, I want to stay. And John said, I've got some other talents. Would you allow me to possibly initiate some marketing programs for you? So John Bennett's the one that he's like, look, I want to take some of the fun personality of you and the culture here because we all have so much fun. We have a code word at the company. The code word's my daughter's name, Caroline. So between all the joking, like when we got to be serious right down to it, you can say the word Caroline and then any question has got to be just straightforward. And John has found ways for, and we talk about R&D, go onto our Facebook, go and look at those pages, look at the images that he has created through the years. He has learned about the magics of babies and testimonials and offers or different a formula, if you will, along the way. And early on that I maybe questioned one piece he put together where there was this young couple, but to me they looked really young and it kind of looked a little, but for the most part, he has been involved in our creative and he brings to us different ideas and he's been focused on that now for 10 years. We just won a few Sammy Awards and he oversees that. But I'll give you an example. It was just yesterday. I saw, when you in your community have the best places to work or the best workplaces, that award's coming out here soon. But we've learned we just won two of the subcategories already before they announced the big one. And one is work life flexibility. So we've gotten that. We've been told it's coming out publicly soon. And then the other one that we've won so far is employee well being,
Mm.
which those sometimes are more than what a Sammy Award means, right? Because this is secretively your team gets to go into these surveys and quietly, and nobody ever knows what they are. And we've won some in the past. And to me, sometimes that's when you've got the right track going. And sometimes for an employee, it's not a joy with their job; it's a job. And obviously, at different times and phases of people's lives and what they have going on at home in different ways, it's different. But to see things like that start to come out and be recognized as a company that way means a lot. But John Bennett is the one that we just find fun, quippy ways. Like I was able to go and purchase a phone number. Our phone number is 678 Get Loud. And
Nice.
as you guys see, if you see me, I probably have a koozie. My phone case I have a low marketing budget, so we try to maximize it. And from our uniforms, so the vehicle wraps, it's like, what are those small little investments? And I know some of you on this call probably don't want to have your vehicle on your car because of the way you drive. Well, remember, I told you at the front, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. I was a taxi cab driver in Boston for many summers, and this having my name on there has probably kept me alive and kept me. But I will admit that I've maybe made the phone ring a few times from some driving stints, and I explained to my team, I'm like, just tell them that we'll make it up to them with a free security analysis. So we'll take care of them one. I'm like, I'm going to find a way to help make that phone ring and opportunities to happen. But
Yeah.
our marketing team, again, I'll encourage you to go to the Facebook page, Instagram, and John Bennett is always one with the R&D rip off and duplicate. He'll be happy to share images. You guys can keep our name on there and you guys can advertise with our name or you can change it to yours. But we enjoy and have fun with it. But obviously, security and life safety and fire and CO and water, it's vital, right? There's nothing funny. So it's like, how do you find a blend or a way to kind of try to have some fun with it? But at the same time, making sure you come across very clear, professional, and committed to the business and the homeowners.
I think that there's a couple of things I want to pull out of that because I got really worried when we were talking about you deciding to fire him. I'm like, wait, man, where is this conversation going? This is it. Like, I don't know, John. I think you're going in the wrong direction here. But I love that what it turned out, and this came up on a call last week, that sometimes you have a really great person, the right person, but they're in the wrong seat on the bus and you got them in the right seat, and now a success story to follow.
So Jake, here's what that formula is. Here's the formula for everybody. It's, think of APE. Has anybody, I'm sure some of them call it APE. A plus P equals E. A is attitude plus performance equals employment. So I'll give you examples at Loud. We've had some people with you have some sales renegade. That's amazing, right? Performance is off the chart. The attitude and how he teaches the technicians and the admin team to process the paperwork. So attitude is way down, performance soars. Guess what? That's not our culture. You've got to go. And like I said, and I admitted, we're quick to hire, slow to fire. So it's like how over the years, because I'll tell you, when I was doing the installs, I did not have time, never mind to come interview you, Jake, to potentially be an employee. I didn't have the time to train you. So I was out there 3 o'clock in the morning, piping the houses for vac or wiring the homes. So it's like over time, and we know how hard it is to replace somebody that you've done some training with. But if you put attitude plus performance, it's the right answer in the long run of building that culture in the team of what you want to put together to grow a business.
It's amazing. And that attitude and that culture is what earns you awards like best workplace, right? And going back to the beginning of the call, you talk about early on looking out the window and seeing 14 cars in the parking lot and realizing not, I love how you kind of framed it in like, hey, this is a lot of responsibility on me, right? And I always say that, like, there's a lot of people that depend on me. There's a lot of people that depend on you for their livelihood. They got bills to pay, and this company and your company needs to be successful. And to be successful, it needs to be a great place to work. And I think that mindset has obviously served you well, and again earns you the recognition of best workplace. That is so cool, and has contributed to your growth over the years. I mean, I just saw you recently purchased a new headquarters. Talk to me about kind of recent growth and the reason behind investing in this new HQ.
Yeah.
What does that say about where the business has been and where it's headed?
That's a great question, especially when we know all the equity firms and we read all the headlines nonstop. And yes, that many have come knocking on the doors along the way for sure. And even with Jeremy Bates on the call, I was listening a few weeks back there. The fun story many of you can relate to. It's like you start in the basement of the home, and then years later, about 7 or 8 years later, finally moved into a small 3,800 square foot office. And there was only two of us in the office at times. I was mostly out, so really Agnes was the main one. And I had probably four subtenants in there. And over time, we slowly kicked them out. And 10 years later, moved into a 10,000 square foot office, and we had some subtenants and slowly kicked them out. And I had the honor to serve as chairman of the board of our Chamber of Commerce in Cobb County for 2 years. And as that was wrapping up, I had gotten elected to serve as chairman of the board of ESA, and that was a 2 year part. And as that was just wrapping up, actually, before I go to ESA, at the end of my chamber is the first time I actually met with Pi Barker to kind of take a look at what that was. That was in October of 2021. Okay. And at that point, I'm like, wow, this is tremendous. And we know many of our friends, some may be on the call, that chose to sell and not. And I said, you know what? I still have so much joy, so much ahead of me. And again, it comes down to more than anything between Eric and Diane and Brad and John Bennett and Eric, the whole list of folks and Joe. This again is far more than me. So it's all their aspects too. And I knew that I had ESA and other things coming down the road. I knew I had that energy and vibration to be able to say, where can we go? What can we do? So in October of 2022, I went and looked and said, did I miss the boat or what happened? In October of 23, in October of 24, October of 25, right? But what had happened is I wrapped up chairman of the board of ESA. It was literally the time again to go, am I going to grow or am I going to sell? So at the beginning of 2025, I kind of really analyzed that a bit and said, is today the day or not? And I said, you know what? It's time to grow. So last year, 2025 is the first year. I've always been so Metro Atlanta focused because there's so much opportunity. The sad number, I'll tell you, with 100,000 plus registered alarm subscriber users in Cobb County, we probably have maybe 5,000 of those customers, maybe six out of our 14,000 plus. So how sad for all the marketing and effort, we've only got 5% of a market. So I've never really wanted to be in other cities or locations, but many times through the years, Macon and Warner Robins had become an area in middle Georgia, something that we had looked at and contemplated. And in February of 25, got a call from a friend down there, and we ended up putting something together. So we opened our first branch in Warner Robins in July of 25. We also closed on the new building. I'd share, well, you probably saw the picture. That building is 51,000 square foot. You guys will enjoy this. As we were dealing with our space planning of the first 12,000 for us to move into, I'll never forget, we had just finally figured it out what it was going to look like. I had to go to the bathroom because I'm 59 years old. I came back and I said, hey, you know what? That does not look like that whole plan. That does not look like the basement of my house. And I'm like, how in the world did we get here? Knowing that this is just the beginning of the next new part of our story and our growth. Because as I said, if you look and go, we're as small as we ever are today, what processes, people, comp plans, culture, what is it that we're doing right and keep it on the right track, or what do we make changes? Which is why I love your calls and I love other uh, groups that we're a part of as a company that helps us listen and learn and bounce questions, even like your Facebook pages. Jake, you ought to put out there, should you put the box of the wire at the sensor, or should you put the box of the wire in
We
the control?
will.
I'm
Poll
curious to
coming soon. Poll coming soon.
man, that debate.
I love how open and honest you are about, what I think is what I think a lot of folks are thinking about right now is like, hey, what do I do? What am I gonna do from here? Do I sell or do I grow? And I can tell you this, a few years ago, there'd been a company that was looking to acquire us, and they'd sent me some stuff to go through, and ultimately I decided, you know what? No, I'm I'm ready to grow, right? I got runway ahead of me. I want to grow. And I will tell you that for any of you that are on the call that are wondering about it casually, sit down and really think about it seriously, because nothing empowers you. In my perspective, nothing will charge you up more than definitively deciding, no, we're growing from here. And I think that your HQ is a very physical, very visual representation of continued investment and growth, and a very real, hey, no, we're not quitting. We're not, and I'm not saying selling is quitting, guys, but I think that, your decision to grow from here is very and and I love your perspective of, we only have 5,000 customers in Cobb County. Like, there's folks on the call right now that would trade their left leg, we'll say, to have 5,000 customers in their area, but it's a growth mindset. It's like, hey, can we go for more? If there's 100,000, why don't we have a bigger piece of it? And I think the decision is, hey, let's go out and get some more. And so
Hey,
you,
Jake, let
oh,
me
go
throw
ahead.
this to you too, just to be
Sure.
very clear for everybody too. I think it was 96 or 97. I made this decision. My children know this. Eric, Diane, Brad, my management team, any employee. I'm a very open, transparent person. And I'd rather be open, honest, and share. And never. It's like, I know someday I will sell. I will sell, and my plan from yours will be equity, because I
Sure.
do want to stay around for somewhere between a 3 and a 6 year window. I do want to be involved. I will tell you, as much fun as I have with the Loud Security Systems name, for anybody out there that sells any day, guess what? The Loud Security Systems name will absolutely vanish and go away. So I'm not one that's like, oh, but my name's so important. It's vital. You got to have my name. No, ADT, and it all leads to, so it's, as you say, sometimes certain things are vital, or I'd say, there's a balance of reality that
Yeah.
it may stay around for 3 to 6 years while I'm there, while they benefit the most that they can while I'm involved, or while the name's there. But it's not something that's ever going to stay in the long run. But that will be my plan. And my team's known that. And today's not the day. And as you just said, well, by doing another branch and by doing the headquarters and looking to grow the team, today's not that day, but it
Yeah.
will be down the road.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent perspective, right? Because I think for a lot of folks that are on the call too, the decision isn't a final decision. It's not a, hey, we're never going to sell the business. It's a, hey, that's not the decision today, and where do we go from here, right? John, I love your story. I love everything that you've done to make Loud Security such a success. But one of the things I really respect and admire about you is how committed you are and how much you give back, to the security industry, whether it's through, some of the other groups, formal groups, informal groups, or through ESA. And so, you are a winner of the Weinstock Award. I think everybody on the call is probably aware of how involved and how committed you've been to ESA. Can you tell me why, as a business owner, as somebody that's in growth mode, as somebody that's got all kinds of, I always see you're traveling the world, and I live vicariously a little bit through you, John. I'm like, where's John at now? This looks amazing. It's not like you have an abundance of time. So why did you feel it was so important to give your time to ESA, and why have you given so much time to the industry at large?
Well, obviously the industry has given so much to me. My community has given so much to me. I mentioned Diane to you guys earlier. Diane's my controller, been there 22 years, I believe, out of my 30. I love her dearly. I don't really like Diane. I'm afraid of Diane because Diane yells at me a lot. Like in the community, we're not a nonprofit and not, you can't just keep donating and giving and so forth. But part of it is, Jake, look, when the industry has done so much for all of us on this call, then how do we not give back, right, Jake? It's like you put this together, we all get to listen and learn. Not that you're doing it to say, hey, I wanted to help my bottom line, but in an indirect way, it helps you. And to me, I'll tell you from a selfish standpoint, I got involved with SEAC, Security Industry Alarm Coalition, back right around 2000, 2001, when we started to work on a model ordinance in the state of Georgia. And I said, you know what? This is about industry preservation. And personally, obviously, if we go to non-dispatch, the value of my business just erodes overnight. So I don't want an ordinance, but if I want to be able to have a say and be at the seat at the table to have a discussion, let's all talk about civic rent for a minute, right? Civic rent is something that I've shared a bunch about, and that is, as we're all busy growing our businesses, focusing on our accounts receivable, our builders, or our staff, or sales opportunities, or fixing something, there is a group with whether it's TMA, ESA, or SIA. So we have three major industry groups. So SIA, Security Industry Association, is basically the representative of all of our manufacturers of products. TMA is the Monitoring Association. That's basically all the monitoring providers that provide most of our services, I'm sure, here. And then ESA is the Electronic Security Association, formerly NBFA, the National Burglar and Fire Alarm Association. And that's where, as an integrator, any one of us, for a $295 investment all the way up, we're giving back into a larger organization that's been around for 78 years, that has helped with legislative issues, alarm issues in states on a federal aspect, while we're focused in our books or our truck or our employees. That team of 20 some odd that Jake and I both have the honor to serve on the board of directors for currently, they're there working on all of our behalf. So I encourage folks, even if you're not going to go get the benefits of all the training they have a program I encourage everybody to look into, and it's called EMP. There's no additional cost for it. If you remember, EMP is Executive Management Professional. It's like having a group of anywhere from 4 to 8 of us that we are on a board call once a month, that you can be very open, raw, and real, and you never be embarrassed because they are your board of directors to guide you to say, hey, I'm at this size. How do I navigate this problem or challenge? So to me, to get that R&D, if you will, the rip off and duplicate from each other, just like I get from my monitoring center, just like I get from my partner manufacturers, with Residio, the first alert program, just like AIN has. There's some of those that sometimes those relationships you build, like even before we get off, Jake, I certainly want to share my cell number because I'm happy to help calls. There are so many that have answered questions for me and given me insight. One you said early on, I'll bring up John Jennings. John Jennings explained, he was out of Arizona. One of the best days in his world was when he got all these builders signed up and he was so excited. But he goes, one of the even better days in his world is when he got to get rid of all his builders and to see what that's like. And part of that to me became, boy, with that change, I'm like, I understood, because when they got caught up to whatever that was, and then say, what's my future going to look like? When we stopped builders in '09, in 2012, we got back into builders and did about $1 million in new revenue that year, but we don't do anywhere near the builders. The other thing I had said, we were debt free up to the year 2010. 2010, we started to do some small acquisitions, and we've said no to more than we've ever said yes to. I want to encourage you on the call that have a monitoring base, that is an asset that we don't get to go buy a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk with. And I personally do not like debt. Okay. But to leverage that asset you have to maybe find somebody local that could make sense for a book of business, you have, and we've done that now for what, 15 years or whatever. And it's been another avenue of growth for us but it's not our sole area of growth. About one third of our recurring revenue, we're about 560 plus thousand recurring, about one third of that we've acquired and two thirds we've organically grown. So I do encourage some of you to get involved with an ESA, because as you give, you're going to gain even more. There's an insurance program that can save you thousands, if not tens of thousands. So, but sometimes we stay so busy, we don't realize the value and riches of what an ESA can do for us as integrators. So it's selfish in some ways, Jake, where I love to give back, and my team loves it when I'm out of the office too at the same time, which is why I go make sure they haven't scraped my name off the door. But I get to give back, and I love connecting and helping folks, just because so many. Look, I'm a flight attendant, and look where we are so far. And because of so many, that some are on this call, that have helped us get where we are today. So that's, you guys take the time to be on this call. I encourage you to become part of a group like ESA.
I think that there's some altruistic aspect to being a member of the industry association, right? And just supporting it and wanting to support the industry. But I really appreciate the fact that you realize that you recognize and that you describe the ways that it really has a real tangible impact on your business. And in some of the indirect ways, when we talk about SEAC as an example, recognizing that the value in alarm monitoring, for the most part, aside from local sounders and all that stuff, is that the police are going to come, right? Like we need that to happen. And there's so many places in the country that has been under attack, and there has been some really dangerous legislation that has been introduced, and because of organizations like SEAC and ESA, we've been able to engage in meaningful dialogue that has prevented really what I would consider to be the Alarmageddon, right? Like if we do not get police dispatch, the alarm industry, the value proposition really goes away, right? And then we start to look at private response and all that stuff, which is challenging in of itself. John, we're running low on time here, and so I want to give you some rapid fire questions to try to get these in before the end of the call. Tell me, what's one thing the industry is underestimating right now?
Residentially, the impact of water detection notification, I see a massive transformation away from DIY. And obviously in the video side, the AI and video proactive, I don't see why we need door contacts and motions and glass breaks and stuff down the road. So AI proactive video.
Hey, wait a second here. Wait a second here. I'm just
You asked the
kidding.
question. That's just my take. What do I know? I'm a flight attendant.
No, I love it. It's so true. I mean, look, we recognize this. We sell so much hardware into the space, but now we're seeing a lot of that replaced through AI. All right, I don't want to go off on a tangent. I got to get to these questions. So, what advice would you give a young entrepreneur starting an alarm company today?
Well, obviously the two things. Number one is make sure you're on Jake's call every Friday. Get on the Facebooks and those pages. And then next would be join your state and your national association, and don't just write a check and pay your civic rent, but find a way to get a seat at some of those tables. The richness and rewards will far outweigh your investment.
I'm so impressed with your success story. I always love talking to you and learning a little bit more about you each time. I didn't know the taxi driver thing. That's a fun nugget. You may be the most interesting man in the world at this point, the more and more I learn about you. But John, your story is one that should resonate with a lot of folks on here, because you came to this industry from outside of it. You figured out a path to success and you went for it, right? And for all of the challenges and things that you may have experienced over the course of, the 30 years with Loud Security, it seems you've done a tremendous job overcoming them, maintaining JOY in your JOB, and just being really a real source of light in this industry. And so, John, I want to thank you for being here. For all of the folks that are on the call, I want to thank you for joining us. We have this call every Friday at 11 a.m. Next week, I'm taking off. My wife and I are expecting a baby boy on Wednesday. And so we're excited about that, but I'm going to take Friday off before I get back to work. Guys.
Is that workforce development? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm working on the next generation of leadership here at SS&Si. But if you do business with us, I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve you as your distributor. If you don't do business with us, I would love the opportunity to talk to you about how we could serve you as a distribution partner and print your logo loud and proud on the products that you install. If you don't do business with us, you are always welcome on Coffee Break with Jake. We're glad that you're here, and John, thank you again for being here today.